As much as I adore the work of Jim Stephanie Sterling's son, by the end of this year, I could not agree with their assessment of 2022 as a bad year for video games. Where JSS had difficulty scrounging up a top 5 of their favorites, I faced excruciating difficulty making cuts. And I don't say this as to shame, but to draw a contrast that I think is pretty interesting, as JSS was not alone in writing the last year of our Dark Lord off for the medium. With that in mind, I wanted to take a moment at the start of this year to go over what I thought stood out in last year, what games spoke to me most in a crowded field, as virtually any one of these games could have been my number one in a truly weaker year. In this list, you will find the usual suspects a lot of contemporaneous channels have hummed in on. Call me pretentious and an egghead if you must for any of my stuffier picks. I'm just vibing over here. So, without further ado, however, I have some honorable mentions in need of mentioning honorably. I go through these quickly, as I don't have forever to sit here recording audio. First off, we have TUNIC, which was a serious gaudy contender itself for a lot of folks, and almost myself included. It's an alluring, beautiful experience. I just didn't play it enough. Something you'd less expect, however, on a list of some cut-rate Jacob Geller acolyte is Arcade Spirits, The New Challengers, a delightful sequel to one of the finest dating sims I have experienced. It's gay, it's fun, it allows you a lot of freedom in sexuality and romanticism unlike anything else in the genre. I love this series, and it was the last cut to this top 10, purely because I've already played and loved its predecessor, whereas everything else in my top 10 today took my breath away in a way that only a game I've never played could. Speaking of something that had me breathless, Prodeus is a kick-ass boomer shooter that I adore, but I've been adoring it since it came out into early access, so that's not particularly news. That being said, absolutely my favorite of the pure-blooded FPS games of 2022. Less ultra-violent, but still violent and ridiculous in its own way, we have Shotgun King, which asks the astute question of, what if chess but with shotgun? Suffice to say, its answer rules. And Rule of Cool carried you pretty far this year. Just ask Rollerdrome. It's if Max Payne stumbled into a Tony Hawk game, but with a retrofuturistic world and an aesthetic reminiscent of the world-renowned Moebius. Stellar stuff, but I could say the same of the Excavation of Hop's Barrow 2, as it's a riveting point-and-click thriller with tremendous storytelling, voice acting, and hair-raising moments. A game that never raised my hairs even once in fear would be the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. Now this is a perfect remake of a perfect commercial release of a perfect Half-Life 2 mod, but it just feels cheap to let the Stanley Parable run rampant through a top 10 list, cause I am an actual sucker for Ultra Deluxe's predecessor. It is one of my favorite games ever, period. Some humor is less written, but more the result of insane builds, though. And Peglin was my go-to roguelite this year for those jaw-dropping moments where I sent some doofus into orbit after yeeting a boulder at him. When it came to real-time roguelite action, though, the intensely derivative Tiny Rogues was a monumental point of joy for me. Yes, its combat is extremely Archvale-esque. Yes, its soundtrack is extremely Loop Hero-like. So what? It kicks ass, so I don't care. And as for my final honorable mention, or HM if you will, that would be Coromon. This is my favorite of the Pokemon-likes bubbling out from the indie scene so far, and all by just doing Pokemon, and doing Pokemon in a way that is infinitely less annoying and predatory. Why do they still get away with making people buy the games multiple times? They're the same fucking game. With those all in mind, let's continue into our otherwise unranked top 10 of the year, at least in my book. Number 1 is Little Gator Game. A late entry into this list, Little Gator Game does a lot with a little. Much like a short hike before it, the game offers a small yet refined open world game, chock full of adorable characters and good charm and vibes. What makes Little Gator Game stand on its own, however, is its best-in-class interpretation of childhood play. This is a game that reminds me of the best parts of my childhood, but with none of the trauma of the bad parts. Not to mention, it's just a beautiful game. Number 9 is Beacon Pines. At a glance, Beacon Pines seems like Little Gator Game, part of this wave of wholesome, cozy games with lackadaisical worlds and adorable characters. At times, Beacon Pines certainly is that. At others, however, it is a fascinating mystery yarn that is an utter joy to unravel the threads of. Number 8 wound up being Neon White. I needed Neon White at this time in the video to break up the potentially saccharine expectations. Not every game in this list will have any cuteness to it, I can assure you that. But on second thought, I now realize that Neon White is not only the first-person speedrunning platformer quasi-shooter that has me perpetually trying to shave attoseconds off for a new PB, in spite of the fact I ordinarily do not care for speedrunning. See, Neon White is also a dating sim, filled to the brim with reddening cheeks and characters nervously bumbling over their own words, so kinda some cuteness there, now that I think of it. Number 7 is Wildflowers, because going into Wildflowers around release day, having received a review copy from its developers, I knew that it was a promising life sim a la Stardew Valley. It had glowing user reviews, its team has pedigree from Maxis, the studio behind The Sims, but up till now, I've always more so admired life sims from afar. It's a genre that requires a heavy time investment, one that I'm not able to partake in, with largely being a one-man band trying to cover all of these interesting games that come out in a given year. However, after my first stream with it, I had a hankering for more, and then more, and then more. It's a wonderfully queer, wonderfully, magnificently, fully voice-acted game with delightful charm to it that has all kept me coming back for more and more. Number 6 is Princess Farmer. Perhaps you're thinking that the notion this list is not exclusively filled with comfy games that let me imagine a queer world without any hatred towards others in the LGBT+ community, and that was a fib. Trust me, we will get to the existential dread you crave so very much eventually, but not yet, as Princess Farmer is a burst of existential joy, if anything. Melding match 3 action platforming, sweet visual novel cuteness, heaps of sapphic romance by a wife and wife team of devs, so it's not fetishistic if you are thinking that. And life semi-romancing. I can't not adore this game. Number 5 is Cult of the Lamb. Ah yes, Matthew, you're really gonna praise something morbid right after just gushing about a game that's about being a lesbian rabbit picking up carrots, and then immediately following it with this. Wait a second, did you just fucking sacrifice that villager? I mean, you definitely already knew of Cult of the Lamb if you happened upon this channel, but it does mark a funny contrast. Cult of the Lamb is playing all of the greatest hits an indie can. It's creepy cute, comparable in a way to Hollow Knight. It's also very Hades-ish, but then again it's kind of very Isaac-esque in its combat, and you slowly amass a fanatical following that will never criticize you, even when you do something extremely fucked up. Hey, that sounds exactly like Factorio, in a way. It's a cracking action roguelite, and basically catnip for Matthews the world over. Number 4 is We Are OFK. There was a moment when I was convinced that We Are OFK would be my game of the year. It was upon completing its final episode of what is tentatively being referred to as its Season 1. As that would imply, We Are OFK is an interactive TV show, essentially, following a virtual band in the vein of Gorillaz if they were gayer and more into bedroom pop. While yes, the game is steeped in Silicon Valley, its emotional storytelling, lovable characters, and genuinely incredible music made it a joy to feel like a part of. Number 3 is NORCO. Are you happy now? You wanted your existential dread? You got your existential dread here, right now, in spades. NORCO is one of the most prying games I've played in my life. This is not a game concerned with testing your twitch reflexes, but rather you, your worldview, your memories. As someone who has had his fair share of trauma derived from my deadbeat parents, no game or any other work of art has ever made me think as much as NORCO has about that. But it's not a miserable game. It has tons of off-kilter humor, wonderful prose, and it is an altogether therapeutic experience. And number 2 is Super Lesbian Animal RPG. This game is the reason why I'm doing this list instead of just letting my nominees list for the Game of the Year award stand as all of the runner-ups. SLRPG must be one of the best video games I have ever played. Yes, you heard that right. It must be one of the best games I've ever played. This is not me bullshitting. This is not me being hyperbolic. I adore this wonderful, jubilant, earnest, hilarious, epic, proud, queer, and visually stunning ball of concentrated gay energy. But I also adored it for how it's a comedic RPG inspired by Undertale, which does have some lightly meta humor baked in as well, which feels so thrilled to be a game. SLRPG does everything you want an RPG in its classic mold to do, and does them all with gusto, and then tops that all off still with some of the best trans and lesbian representation seen in a game of this scale in wonder and genre. This game made me laugh harder than any other game this year, but it also knew how to set off into the sunset in just the perfect way to make me want to tear up. Oh yeah, and the music, it slaps, as is obligatory of any RPG in the pantheon of great RPGs. And SLRPG is in that pantheon, my friends. And finally, number 1, Citizen Sleeper. If you've already seen my awards show I do, you already knew this was coming. While this list is otherwise not ordered in terms of quality, I of course saved my Game of the Year for last. In my mind, it shares that pedestal with SLRPG, NORCO, etc., but I've decided to pigeonhole myself into an award show with a Game of the Year award, and I wanted to put my hat in the ring for Citizen Sleeper above anything else. Why? Citizen Sleeper is an existential experience. It is beautiful. It is haunting. One experience that you just zone out to after dark, and it feels like Amos Roddy's ambient soundtrack to it is slowly but surely rewriting your DNA. I come away from Citizen Sleeper feeling like a changed gamer each time. Sometimes you just want to meditate over who or what you are, as well as your personal experiences with gender, all with an ever-present reminder that you are nothing to the idle bourgeois class, but another body to order around. But you know you're more than that, as do those in the community you find solace in, and that's what puts Citizen Sleeper in that singular position, if there had to be a singular gaudy position this year, despite the fact that there are quite a few other games of its quality. So that was 2022, by way of 10 magnificent games that you may have missed. If anything here caught your eye, please please do give it a bash at some point in your life, yeah? Honestly, some of my favorite games ever in here. I'm going to find any excuse I can to keep rattling on about them. And you, dear listener, are not powerful enough to stop me.